You're listening to the Cooking from Scratch podcast. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have Dr. Angie Brown, a doctor of physical therapy, join us for an insightful discussion on high-protein eating. We'll explore how this approach can benefit your muscles, bones, and overall health. But we'll also dig into the key question, is high-protein eating for everyone? Whether you're an experienced high-protein eater or a health-conscious eater looking to support your wellness journey, this episode has something for you. So, let's dive in. Hi, I'm Aaliyah Iden, and with over 15 years of cooking in professional kitchens and at home for my family, this is the first non-cooking cooking podcast that shares how to make cooking easier so you can feel inspired and motivated to cook in the midst of your busy life. It's the beginning of 2025, and this year I've refocused the podcast and I'm leaning more into the healing aspect of homemade meals. A couple of years ago, I started eating high-protein meals, which resolved some health issues I was having. Then this fall, I started a cooking membership for high-protein eaters to share my favorite recipes and meal plans that I developed to help others on the same journey. When you tune into these episodes, you'll hear from health and fitness coaches and healers about the role and benefits of high-protein eating. Stay tuned for more. Thanks for agreeing to meet with me today and talk a little bit about high-protein stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We'll talk all the things protein. Let's do it.
Yeah, awesome. So I just wanted to ask you some questions. So I'm a chef, so I have a little bit of background in nutrition because I've just studied on my own.
Yeah.
But my specialty is really just making food taste amazing. And I've recently started eating high protein in the last couple of years. So I've been interviewing people who are more of an expert in this field, nutritionists, exercise people. So I came prepared with my list of questions for you today that will hopefully help out some of our listeners too. I mean, just basic, a really good motivator for me is really understanding the why behind what I'm doing. And I know that I started feeling better once I started eating high protein meals, really focusing on getting 20 to 30 grams of protein at every meal. Can you tell me, that's helping me build muscle? What is this helping me do? I mean, is that just really basic, straightforward stuff? Or like, what else do I need to know about what the high protein is doing for me?
Yes. So protein is very important for a lot of different things. It's definitely helping you build muscle. Okay. So especially when you're getting up in that 30 grams of protein region, so this is one of those things that like people do it because they've heard of it, but they don't really understand why they're doing it. So basically that 30 grams of protein, when we get around that range, that actually helps to stimulate protein muscle synthesis. Okay, so it actually stimulates your muscles to get stronger, to build more muscle, which is a great thing. Yeah. So not only does it help with muscle protein synthesis, it also helps with bone. It helps to rebuild lots of different things in your body because protein is the building block of muscle. It's the building block of life, essentially. And protein is, one of the macronutrients. We talk about proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, but protein is really broken down into amino acids.
Right.
And so those amino acids are actually what are, the actual building blocks that help our bodies to build those stronger muscles and stronger bones.
Okay. And is this something that's for everybody? I mean, I know you and I work with people, specifically with high protein eaters, women over 40 or 45 phase of life. I know you work a lot with runners. Is high protein for everybody? Or is it just really more like, talk a little bit about that. Like, should everybody be getting, I know this is really general, but should everybody be getting 20 to 30 grams of protein every meal? Or is it better for certain age groups? Or if you're trying to hit a certain goal? Like, there's so much information out there. And I feel like people really are like, wait, is this a train I'm supposed to jump on? I'm not really sure I'm supposed to do this or not.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that eating more protein can benefit most people. There are some people with certain medical conditions that have to be more cautious about the amount of protein that they consume. People that have kidney issues specifically have to be careful with that. And they obviously need to follow the guidance of their doctor. So I don't want to make a blanket statement as a medical professional. I'm a physical therapist for those of you that don't know me. And so I never make blanket statements. Or I
Of
shouldn't
course.
say never, but very,
Right.
very rare. But I think
Right.
that the vast majority of people could benefit from eating more protein in their diet. And specifically for women over 40, when we start getting into this transition that all of us are going to go through,
Right.
which is perimenopause and then eventually after menopause. Like menopause
Right.
is one of these things. Perimenopause is this word that keeps getting thrown around a
Yeah.
lot lately. It's
Absolutely.
like one of those things, and not everybody understands what it is or what it means or if I'm in it or what the heck I'm supposed to do differently.
Right.
But basically, menopause is just this one date in time.
Okay.
People think that like menopause is like to stop, the end of your period, and that's then you're going into menopause. But menopause is actually just one date in time. It's that one date on the calendar that is 12 months after your last period.
Right.
So you have to not have had a menstrual cycle for a full year to actually be at the point of menopause.
Okay.
So the 10 years before that is considered perimenopause.
10 whole years. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's different. It varies,
Right.
but perimenopause
Sure.
can last for 5 to 10 years before that point.
Yeah.
And it varies for different women. So the average age of menopause in the United States is 51.
Okay.
So the average age of perimenopause
Right.
in the United States is actually 35 to 45. And then the average age of the range of menopause is 45 to 55, with 51 being like the most common age. Okay.
Yeah.
So women can start experiencing symptoms of perimenopause as early as 35 years old.
Oh.
So I've heard of some women that have experienced it even earlier than that. It's very rare for people to be earlier than that, but it does happen. And then there's also women that go into medically induced menopause because they have surgeries to remove their uterus, their ovaries, from breast cancer or other forms of cancer, other sort of trauma that leads to them having to have a full hysterectomy. They can have medically induced menopause very early in life, right? So, so this condition does affect a lot of people. So going back to your original question of like who should be eating high protein, definitely women over 40 need to be increasing their protein in their diet. And that's because during perimenopause and menopause, as our hormones start to shift, it's harder for us to build muscle and bone. Okay, because estrogen is what's known as an anabolic hormone, which means it helps our body to build up stronger. And so as we lose estrogen during this transition phase of perimenopause and into menopause, it's harder for our body to build muscles and bones. So protein becomes even more important, as well as the way that we're training, the way that we're exercising becomes even more important. Our lifestyle choices, the way that we manage stress, all of it becomes even more important during when we get into this phase, because I like to think of estrogen as kind of like our wing woman. She's like the one that she's got your back, So if you make choices that maybe aren't ideal, like you go out partying too late, or you eat, lots of food that's your body doesn't really agree with your body or isn't the most quote unquote nutritious, estrogen helps you kind of clean up and make sure that you're okay. So as you're losing that estrogen, we lose a lot of the protective effects that estrogen has. And one of those things is building muscle, building bone, helping to regulate cortisol levels in the body. Like estrogen and progesterone, those are the two main ones that are kind of known as like the female hormones that decline. And eventually, like we lose it completely after menopause. Those are like the two main ones, and I lost my train of thought there. But as those hormones decline, then all of our choices just matter a whole lot more.
Right. It's interesting because I got into it having read high protein eating, having read an article about women over 40 and building muscles. So that was like the reason that I did it mentally. But then what I realized was happening is that my blood sugar was a lot more stable and it was giving me way more energy. So that was like what I actually felt. I've never really, I don't know if you like feel muscle building. Like I feel like I'm maintaining right now. I'm not actively building, so I'm not actively lifting heavy. but it's the blood sugar thing that keeps me coming back. Now that if I don't have a high protein meal in the
Yeah.
morning, I feel kind of terrible the rest of the day. And that
Yeah.
always was sort of a
Mhm.
factor, but I was able to kind of ignore it and be like, oh, fine, I'll just have a not protein breakfast. But now if I don't, my day
Yeah.
is terrible.
I mean,
Truly.
I love that you're that connected to your body
Yeah.
that you can actually feel the difference in it, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that don't even know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And that's, what you're saying though is extremely accurate scientifically as well,
Yeah.
because one of the things that a higher protein diet does do it does help to regulate your blood sugar. It helps to
Right.
regulate, like, with your cortisol levels, your insulin response, and those are a couple of the hormones that I was talking about too. That estrogen does have an effect on, because estrogen
Okay.
has an effect, widespread effects in the body. This is what I was talking about before
Yeah.
when I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. That's all right.
So people often think of estrogen and progesterone as like, okay, well, those are the female hormones. They regulate the menstrual cycle.
Right.
And they, of course, play a role there. But they also do so many other things in our body that we as women were never even taught. Me as a medical professional, I was never even taught all of this information that I'm now learning. Like, it's taken a lot of my own research and digging into continuing education and scientific research, and there's just not a ton of stuff out there. But one of the things that estrogen does do is that it helps to regulate our cortisol levels, and it helps to regulate our insulin response as well. So it makes perfect sense, right, of why you're experiencing that way, especially as a woman over 40, because as a woman over 40, your body is less sensitive to insulin. So we actually have decreased insulin sensitivity, which is not a good thing, right? Which is why our risk for metabolic disease like diabetes increases during perimenopause and menopause, because we have decreased insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
So with a higher protein diet, with the different types of exercise that we can do, we can help to improve our body's sensitivity to insulin, which is what we want. All right. Because that will help to regulate the blood sugar levels. And that's one of the things that you are noticing, because when your blood sugar levels are higher, that can lead to a lot of cognitive symptoms like anxiety, mood swings, that feeling of angriness. Like, there's a lot of different things that people experience with that. And then going back to the other main hormone that estrogen helps to regulate, which is cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone.
Right.
So that's why so many women during this phase of life they noticed these mood changes, right? These changes like with increased anxiety and increased depression, and like a lot of these changes with the way that our moods are, that you're like, I don't understand what the heck is happening. A big part of that is because of cortisol, because as estrogen decreases, our cortisol levels remain higher. They're less regulated. So we're kind of constantly in this higher state of stress, this state of like fight or flight. You're just kind of like on edge, and you don't really know why. And it's a lot of times it's because those cortisol levels are higher. And again, our food choices and our exercise choices and our lifestyle choices can really help to regulate cortisol levels and regulate our insulin levels better as well.
Hey there, Cooking from Scratch podcast listeners. If you've been paying attention to previous episodes, you know that health is one of my biggest motivators for cooking. When I started eating high-protein meals a couple of years ago, it gave me more energy and resolved other health issues I was having. This, in turn, inspired me to start sharing the recipes and meal plans I created using my 17-plus years of experience as a chef and recipe blogger with other health-conscious eaters. If you're on the high protein meal train, or even if you're just curious about it, listen up, because I have something new that will help you eliminate the guesswork from high protein eating and easily hit 30 grams of protein at every meal. In my new free masterclass, 5 Steps to Master Your High Protein Meals, you'll discover why wasting time and energy on hours of meal prep is not the answer, and what you need to do instead to always have a craveable high-protein meal at your fingertips. In addition, you'll discover the most important changes you can make now to end meal decision fatigue, and how to easily hit 30 grams of high-quality animal protein at every meal without feeling stressed or overwhelmed. When you tune into this no-cost masterclass, you'll walk away feeling confident that you are on track to hit your health goals. And for all who attend live on January 23rd, you'll get a free copy of our 4-day high-protein meal plan that includes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, all who register for this no-cost class will receive a replay, but you're going to want to do your best to tune in live because the high-protein meal plan that's full of incredible chef-created meals that take less than 30 minutes to make will only be available to those who attend live. To save your spot for this free training, go to www.soulspacechef.com/class. Again, that's www.soulspacechef.com/class, and I can't wait to see you there. Now, back to the episode.
So you need the three, I mean, really we were talking about on an earlier call, like the movement and what you eat are two really big, important things, and then the lifestyle thing too. But those two things can just make a ton of difference.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Speaking of which, one of the questions that always comes up for me is, before I do any kind of exercise, I'm like, should I eat? Should I not eat? What should I eat after? There's all these questions in my head about, especially after. I've always had this huge question, like, okay, I work out, I play tennis for an hour and a half. I'm really sweaty. What am I supposed to eat pretty soon afterward? Is it supposed to be protein? Is it supposed to be fat? Is it supposed to be carbs? I've read so many different things, and it's just now, because I'm paying more attention to all this stuff, I'm super curious, like, what's the best thing for you to help, I don't know, what you're build muscles, stabilize your energy? I'm not sure which it is.
So after exercise, it's very important for us to refuel our body as soon as possible. Okay, we'll just start saying it that way. There are some people who say there's a 30-minute window for you to of optimal, like if you get in that nutrition within 30 minutes of exercise, it's a very, very good thing. It's very important. Some people will say it's critical. There's different words for it.
Sure.
But basically, for real life, eat as soon after exercise as possible. Within 30 minutes is ideal. Now, does that mean that if you miss your 30-minute window, you're screwed? Absolutely not, right? Like if it's 45 minutes after, if it's 60 minutes after, it's still good for you. Okay, so eat after exercise, right? Got it. Eat as soon after exercise as possible. Now, as far as what to eat, it depends on the type of exercise that you're doing. But in general, you should be eating both carbohydrates and protein after exercise. Same thing before exercise, but we can talk about before exercise after. So afterwards, you definitely want to be taking in 30 grams of protein as soon as possible after exercise, because like I mentioned before, it helps to stimulate that muscle protein synthesis, right? So when you're exercising, especially if it's a higher intensity exercise, your cortisol levels are increased because your cortisol levels are your stress hormones. Exercise is a stress on the body. So one of the things that cortisol does is it actually releases sugar into your bloodstream so that sugar can get to the working cells so that you have energy. Your muscles actually have energy, right? Glucose is the fuel for our muscles and the fuel for all of our cells. So cortisol levels are higher, releasing sugar into the blood so that sugar can fuel the exercise that we're doing. Okay. Now, with cortisol levels higher, our body is in what's called a catabolic state, which is that state of breakdown, because it's breaking down the sugars that you have stored in your muscles and your liver as glycogen, and it's putting it back out into the bloodstream as glucose. Okay. So your body's in that state of breakdown. And when you refuel after your workout, especially with protein, you get your body back into an anabolic state, which is that state of buildup. You want your body to recover and start building that muscle back as soon after exercise as possible. Because if your body stays in that catabolic state, then your cortisol levels remain elevated and your body is still in that stressed out state. And if cortisol levels are elevated, the other thing your body tends to do is hold on to fat, hold on to the store. Okay? Because
you don't want that.
We don't want that. Right? So we want to finish our exercise, and then we want
Right.
to help our body shift back over into that muscle building, that bone building, like that recovery period of time
Right.
as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So that's why the sooner you eat after exercise, you're like jumping back, you're helping your body shift over more effectively. And then when you eat more protein, that 30 grams of protein, you're giving your body the building blocks that it needs to build the muscles, right? Like I like to think of protein as like the cement if you're trying to build a house, right? Like if you're trying to build a house, you can have, like, you need supplies, right? You're not going to get very far without supplies. Like without the concrete block and the cement, your body needs that. And that's really what protein helps with.
Okay.
You also need carbohydrates in your body, especially as a woman over 40. Your body changes the way that it processes carbohydrates. Okay. So again, the loss of estrogen, like estrogen actually helped our bodies to process carbohydrates. So as we lose it, we just process it all differently. So one of the best times for us to eat carbohydrates is after exercise, because we want to refuel our muscles. We want to refuel and restock those glycogen stores that we've just used up. Especially, like, you know, I work with runners, and carbohydrates are the body's primary source of fuel for runners. And so we want to try to restock those as quickly as possible and like really maximize our body's glycogen storage, because that's going to help us run faster, run longer, you know, achieve the goals that we want to achieve.
Right. And just have more energy, really, like how you'll feel, you know, you'll feel better if you're eating right after you have a hard workout. Definitely. Okay. That's good information. Thank you for this. It's great. I hope people out there, are getting something from this. So if people do want to try the high protein thing, that's something that they've been kind of thinking about, and this sounds great, but I don't really know how to get started. I know one of your past podcasts what's the name of your podcast again?
Real Life Runners.
Oh, it's the same as, So the Real Life Runners podcast, I saw a few episodes ago, you had an episode about motivation and taking small steps, and how small steps really basically build into bigger habits. And I think that's such an important thing for any new type of habit that you're trying to build, but especially for something new that you're trying to eat. It's a nice way to come at it. I think that's not like this diet mindset. Like, I'm really wary about talking about high protein, because I think people really easily, or maybe they're just used to being in this mindset of like, I either do it or I don't do it, and anything in between isn't any good. You know, like, I didn't get high protein today, so I'm just going to give up. You know, instead of like, hey, I'm going to try to go for breakfast. I'm going to try to eat 30 grams at breakfast. And I did it. So it's just one small step that they can feel good about, and then they can build on that, right? They feel that they can do it. Is there anything else that you would add to that in terms of small steps? Or
I mean, the first small step, I think, is finding protein sources that you like. You know, there's a lot of people out there, and they're like, I'm like, oh, cottage cheese is a great source. And I'm like, cottage cheese is disgusting, you know? And it's like, I'm like, I love cottage cheese, right? Like, yogurt, they don't like yogurt, or they like yogurt, but they like the flavored yogurt that has 30 grams of sugar that comes along with it, right? Like, so I think the first step is finding protein sources that you like, you know, and then the next thing to me would be like what you do, which I think is so cool, is helping that protein taste better, right? Like, plain chicken is disgusting.
I know, and it's usually like dry and overcooked. I'm like, how are you people eating this?
It's so gross, right? But
like,
season it correctly, and you cook it correctly, and it can be delicious, right? So it's like how to find those protein sources that you like, and then learning how to make them taste better, because if it tastes better, you're going to want to eat it more, right? Like, I think that there's this misconception that you need to eat like chicken, brown rice, and broccoli to be healthy, and it's an absolute you know, it's crazy. Like, nobody can live that way for an extended period of time. So that's one thing, is like finding things that you like, you know, and finding things that taste good. And then I would say, kind of do an honest assessment of where you are right now. Like, how much protein am I actually eating, you know? And that might require a little bit of tracking at the beginning. Like, I'm not a big person that says like we should be tracking everything, and like every single bite of food that you go in your mouth needs to go into an app or onto a piece of paper. Like, that to me like creates way too much stress and anxiety. I'm not all about that, right? But I think tracking for a short period of time to see where you are can be very helpful, because it can be very eye-opening for people. Like when they actually track and they think they're eating. I mean, I've had clients tell me this too, because like eating more protein is one of the things that we go over in my program as well. And they're like, oh, I'm eating healthy, like I'm eating protein. And I was like, okay, but how much are you eating? You know, and they'll kind of tell me, and they're like, oh shoot, like I'm only eating like 60 grams a day.
Right.
And they were thinking that they were eating enough, right? But I'm like, that's like half of what you need to be eating actually, right? And so so I would say kind of getting a clear and accurate picture of where you are is a really good place to start. But if you don't want to do that, then just start adding more protein in little ways, right? Like start adding in like if you're making scrambled eggs, for example, right? Instead of, people are like, yeah, 2 eggs, that'll give me all the protein. Like that's only 12 grams of protein, right?
Totally, yeah.
So start adding in some more egg whites to that, right? Like adding in more egg whites just to kind of bulk it up. And they're like, oh, that's too much food. Okay, well then don't add 4 more egg whites. Start with 1, right? Even just 5 more grams is going to make a difference, right? And like slowly working their way up to that 30 grams. Because oftentimes when I talk to people and I'm like, oh, you need to be eating 30 grams per meal, they're like, what? Like, what do you, like, how? Like, I can't even eat that much food, right? And I tell people like everything is trainable, right? Like I train runners, like people that have never run a step in their life are now running marathons.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Because it's trainable. Right? Anything is trainable, and your stomach is trainable too. And so you don't want to go from eating 50 grams of protein a day to 120 grams of protein a day. You're probably going to feel like you want to throw up. Like
totally.
It'd be too much, right? So smaller steps are really important. It's like going from 50 to 60 and 60 to 70, right? Like, and then 70 to 90. And then all of a sudden it doesn't seem so much. And like, your body can get used to it. Your brain can get used to it, right? Because your brain, your brain always wants to tell you why this is ludicrous and why,
why you shouldn't be doing it. All the stuff. Definitely.
And then the other thing I would suggest are using protein powders. Like I think that there's a lot of people out there that like to bash protein powders and tell you that protein powders are ultra processed and they're not good for you. And granted, there are a lot of protein powders out there that have a lot of junk in them, like, and so you do have to be conscious and aware of what you are taking in. But there's a lot of really good products on the market that are minimally processed, or I shouldn't say minimally processed because they are ultra processed, but they use natural ingredients, right? They don't have all of the fillers and all of the artificial flavors and colors and sweeteners and all the junk that a lot of them, because like you have to be picky with it. But I think that protein powders are a fantastic way. I mean, I've got mine right here. I probably have a protein shake or drink almost every day. Like maybe not every day, but like it's not easy to always hit some of those protein levels. And so yes, it's ideal to use it, to get your protein from whole food, natural sources. And at the same time, you have to do things that work for you in your real life and make the best choices that you possibly can. Right. Absolutely. And so for me, getting more protein in is more important. And like, also there's only so much chicken I can eat. I'd much rather drink chocolate milk that, has protein in it, because I'm going to I'm going to stick with it, right? And we need to find things that we are going to stick with, that we can look forward to, and that we can incorporate into our daily life.
Totally. That's awesome. So you have a program going right now. Don't you have a challenge or something?
I do.
Happening?
Yeah, well, it was last week actually. So
it was last week.
We had our 5-day challenge last week, so that was super fun. So if anybody's finding this now, the content is still up right now. It's all still available for the rest of this week. So my 5-day challenge, I really give people like about 10 or 12 days to go through it because life happens, and it gets in. Sometimes even our best laid plans are not always follow through the way we want them to. So yes, all the challenge content is still available.
And it's for runners specifically, beginning runners, all levels?
All levels, all levels. But this challenge was specifically for women runners over 40. So,
okay.
but all levels. Like I've got women in the challenge and even in the program that are brand new to running, and they're just kind of starting on their running journey. And then I've got women that have been running for decades. So, you know, it's really a meet yourself where you are kind of program, and I can show you how to get where you are to where you want to go. And that's really what the coaching program is about. And inside of my coaching program, we go through the 3 different elements that we need to have as runners over 40 if we are going to get stronger, because this is the big problem that I see with a lot of women, especially runners in this phase of life, is that they don't adjust their training. They're not adjusting their nutrition. They're just kind of doing things like they used to do because it used to work. You know, like things used to work. And
Absolutely.
things stop working the same way. Like, right, we all, if you're in this phase of life, if you're over 40, you notice your body.
Totally relate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, things are changing. Things are, you know, not going the way that you want them to sometimes. And so doing things, continuing to do things the old way isn't going to work for you. So we have to change. And, you know, a big thing that we went through in the challenge last week is really this huge mindset shift that we need to make first before we start getting into the details of like, what kind of runs do I look like and how much protein do I need to eat? Like all of these, you know, details and specifics. So many people want to jump into those details.
Yeah.
But we shift the way we're thinking about perimenopause and menopause first. And the big shift that I invited people to last week is instead of thinking about losing weight or instead of thinking about just getting faster, like these very tangible things that we often look to, right? We as runners, numbers are part of the game, right? Like you can see your distance and your pace and all these things, and people just want to. We first need to shift. Can you see everything good?
I lost you for a second.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you're good. Keep going.
Yeah, I just got a low battery warning, so we'll be fine.
Okay.
So we need to shift into building over losing, right? So many people are obsessed with losing weight, losing fat, losing this, right?
Yep.
When we focus on that, we end up training in a way and eating in a way oftentimes that is breaking our body down, that is leading to a loss of muscle, a loss of bone, that's setting us up for osteoporosis, that's setting us up for loss of lean muscle mass, that's setting us up for future disability and frailty. And we can shift over into how can I build myself up? How can I get stronger? Because if we focus on building, if we focus on strength, you'll get faster.
Yeah.
You'll lose fat. Right? Like when you build muscle, it's going to help your body burn more fat more effectively. Right? So if you really want to lose weight, and when we talk about losing weight, it's not actually about weight. It's about fat. Right? Like,
Yes, it is.
You don't want to lose muscle.
No, you don't.
You don't want to lose bone, but you do. Right? And this is the thing that a lot of women don't understand is that when they're cutting calories and only focus on restricting, they're losing muscle. They're losing bone. They're not just losing fat. Right? And so if we shift our focus over into building over losing and strong over skinny, then by focusing on something different, we're going to get the results that we want, which is super.
Yeah, and I love that. That's how I approach high protein eating. Like I never restricted myself. I just added more protein, but then naturally I wasn't as hungry for the other things.
Yeah.
Right? So I was just building up the protein. Yeah, I love that way of looking at things. Yeah,
absolutely.
Adding instead of restricting. Very cool. I love it.
So I mean, like that's a big part, you know, of what I do is like helping them understand how to train, understand how to eat, and then the piece underlying all of it is really this regulation of the nervous system, which training plays a part in, our nutrition plays a part in, like we mentioned, like with the cortisol levels and the stress and all these things. Yeah. Because if our body's constantly under this state of stress, it doesn't matter how hard you're working out, and it doesn't matter how much protein you eat. If you're constantly stressed out, you're still going to be in a state of breakdown. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And so that's why all these pieces really need to work together in a very holistic way if you're going to feel better, have more energy, like feel, the way that you want to feel. And that's really what it's all about. Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's really the end of the day. All about. Like it doesn't matter if it's high protein eaters or runners that I work with. We all want to feel good in our own skin. Yeah. right?
Exactly.
Like we want to have energy, we want to have vitality, we don't want our bodies to be hurting all the time. Like, and that's what, it is possible. A lot of people think that like, oh, I'm just getting older. I'm like, this has nothing to do with the number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
that is what we're taught. Oh, it's just age. This is just how I'm meant to feel now. Yeah. I refuse to subscribe to that.
Absolutely not. No.
Definitely.
And so like, my mom was here this morning working out. I finally convinced her to work out with me, and
that's awesome.
she is, let's see, 72. She'll probably she's fine, right? Like if I say that on here,
she's fine.
But she was like, Ange, what do you expect? I'm old. And I was like, no. I go, I'm like, first of all, she's in way better shape than like a lot of other people that she even said that to me. She's like, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. And I was like, well, that's good. You are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with all the choices that you're making, right? Like your exercise choices, your nutrition choices, your relationships, like all of it has an effect on you.
Yeah, it's so true. I love it. It's all so comprehensive and holistic, always.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Definitely.
Because, like, people like to think of it in, like, little silos, like, well, my rest is over here, my nutrition's over here, my life is over here, my job is over here. Like, absolutely not.
Right.
None of you.
Yeah, they're all related to each other, for sure.
They're all interconnected. You can't separate any of them.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think this is a great conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode from start to finish. If you have any questions or comments about what was shared, please click on the link at the top of the show notes to send us a note. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and share this episode with your friends.